This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
I'm Roby Brock. Welcome to this edition of Talk Business and Politics. Day 86 of the 93rd Arkansas General Assembly, and the legislature wasted no time overriding Governor Asa Hutchinson's veto for Monday. House Bill 1570, which the governor vetoed on Monday, is led by Representative Robin Lundstrom and Senator Alan Clark. It would prohibit gender transition procedures from being performed in state on individuals under the age of 18. Known as the Arkansas Save Adolescents from Experimentation Act, it would prevent physicians from performing the procedures. It also would ban the use of public funds or the providing of insurance coverage for them. The House of Representatives quickly overrode the veto of the bill that restricts medical treatment for transgender kids. The veto override in the House was 71-24. 3 Republicans actually voted against the override. In the Senate, the veto override vote was 25-8, all Republican votes there. There were also a number of highly controversial bills working its way through the House Education Committee today. Here's a rundown. House Bill 1701 passed the Education Committee. It allows for teachers to teach what's known as creationism in public school classes. House Bill 1749 requires transgender kids to be called by the name on their registration cards at the beginning of a school year. The measure originally would have required students be called by the name on their birth certificates. House Bill 1830 also passed the education panel. It says public schools shall treat a student's voluntary expression of a religious viewpoint the same as a secular viewpoint. In essence, a religious freedom at school measure. All of these bills now head to the full House for consideration. And you can read full coverage of the committee's work at our website at talkbusiness.net. When we come back, Governor Asa Hutchinson holds his weekly press conference on COVID-19. And later, Representative Jimmy Gazaway, Republican of R-Paragould, he's been front and center on the renters' rights bill that has been stalled in the House. We'll find out why right after this. Talk Business and Politics is sponsored in part by Capital Advisors Group and...
You'll find us at the end of a lot of long country roads, covering over 60% of the great state of Arkansas. Our 17 electric distribution cooperatives are working day and night to provide reliable, affordable power to over 500,000 homes, farms, and businesses, just like yours. The Electric Cooperatives of Arkansas, your local energy partners.
They say an apple a day keeps the doctor away. But if you're looking for something more, Walmart has you covered. We provide quality care, no appointment necessary. Whether you're looking for fresh, healthy groceries to fill your prescription, get a flu shot, or pick up your next pair of glasses, we're standing by with in-store health professionals available across the country to offer patient-first, affordable care whenever you need it. Apples, optional.
Governor Asa Hutchinson held his weekly press conference on COVID-19 today. Here are some of the highlights. Arkansas has received nearly 1.9 million vaccines since December 14th, including 58,000 in the previous 24 hours. Of that, 1.276 million doses have been administered, or roughly 68% of the vaccines received, according to the Department of Health. The department also reports that over 357,000 Arkansans are partially immunized, and almost 478,000 are fully immunized. There are more than 3 million people in Arkansas. The governor and health officials are worried about vaccine hesitancy, which is problematic in most areas of the state. For the record, the total death toll for COVID-19 on Arkansans now stands at 5,653. And you can catch our full coverage of the governor's press conference on our website at talkbusiness.net. A quick break. We'll be joined by Representative Jimmy Gazaway, Republican of R-Paragould, child custody, renters' rights, a governor's veto override, and more. Talk Business and Politics is sponsored in part by Impact Management Group and...
We have a large commitment to our solar for good reason. It lowers customers' rates. It's emissions-free.
Entergy Arkansas is the largest provider of solar in the state of Arkansas.
Utility-scale solar is much more economic for customers. We're going to operate it. We're going to maintain it. We're going to focus on it. That's what we do for a living.
We want to continue to find ways to partner with our customers to meet their renewable energy goals.
Customers want this. We want to provide it. So our commitment is for the long term.
Here's to the fearless fight. the comeback, the battle against all odds. For some, it's taking the first step. For others, it's forging a new path, a chance to prove to ourselves what we're really made of. And with the name trusted in insurance for more than 70 years, even a battered spirit can come back stronger. Arkansas Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Live fearless.
Joining me now is Representative Jimmy Gazaway, Republican of Paragould. Always good to see him in person. Representative Gazaway, thank you for being on the program.
Good to be with you, Roby.
Let's begin with one of the bills that's been one of the bigger issues this session that deals with renters' rights. You are the lead sponsor on this. You've navigated it out of the House committee and onto the House floor, but it's in a holding pattern there. Tell me what's going on. I'm assuming you're counting votes. Where do you stand today? When might you run this bill?
Well, there's a lot of negotiation going on, and I think that's one of the things that people don't understand. We had a really good result in the committee. We passed it out of there with both Republican and Democrat support, and so it's now sitting on the House calendar. And one of the challenges is that even if we get it through the House, which I think we can do, we still have to get it through the Senate. And so there's some negotiations going on right now between the House and the Senate because it would be fruitless if we passed it through the House and then ultimately couldn't get it through the Senate. So we're working with the Senate and the leadership there and are hopeful that we can come up with a bill that we can get through this session.
I don't have to tell you, 49 other states have passed some legislation to this extent. What's the hang up? Why is there not a solution out there in one of those 49 states that will mollify some of the opponents of this?
Well, I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there, and that's been one of the most difficult things about this bill is that, we've had to try to dispel so many misconceptions that exist. I think over the years, there's been built up, this idea of kind of the worst case scenario tenant, and that somehow justifies not having some minimum standards. But you're exactly right. Every other state in the country has seen fit that we should have some very basic minimum standards of habitability for rental property. And again, we're talking about things like hot and cold running water, safe electrical wiring, plumbing that works, locks on exterior doors, smoke alarms, things that are important and that materially affect health and safety. And so, once you get past the misconceptions and the talking points that have existed for years, kind of like in the committee, we passed it with Republican and Democrat support because once people understand it, they see that it's reasonable, but it's really been a challenge to try to overcome those misconceptions.
So the misconceptions seem to be where the problem is, not necessarily language in the bill.
Well, and of course, there's always some issues about the language. Some of the Senate, and that's what's going on now. There's folks in the Senate who want to see certain language included, which I think we're going to be okay with. We want to make sure that some of the language that was in our original bill is included so that we have something meaningful. So the language is always important, but I think the bigger challenge has been just overcoming those misconceptions.
All right. You are also lead sponsor on another bill that changes the way child custody is dealt with in the state of Arkansas. Basically, we start from the position of joint custody, which is different for Arkansas law. Why this change? Why now?
Well, really, the law is outdated. I don't think that the law has kept up with the way that society has evolved. The way the law worked for many decades was fine in the 50s and 60s, but the way that society has changed and also the research that's developed, there's a mountain of research out there that clearly indicates that joint custody is best for children when it's appropriate. And one of the misconceptions about this bill is that there are some who say that this is going to make joint custody for every situation, and that's not so. There are clearly certain cases where joint custody is not appropriate and it doesn't mandate joint custody. But the research is clear that in the vast majority of cases where you have two fit, good parents, joint custody is what's best for kids. And so the legislature took a substantial step in 2013 when they said that joint custody was favored in Arkansas. But this actually, here we are in 2021, and now we've created a presumption that in every case, the starting point is going to be joint custody, unless there's clear and convincing evidence that that's not in the best interest of children.
All right, major change there for people to keep up with. All right, the governor issued his second veto of the session on Monday. This was dealing with House Bill 1570, which affects medical treatment for transgender teenagers, transgender kids. Did the governor's arguments for his veto, did that change? You voted for that bill when it came through the House. Has the governor's arguments changed your position on that bill? And maybe give me a little census or a little taste of what the consensus of the GOP House caucus is on this.
So I listened to the governor's press conference, and I have to say, I thought the governor had made thoughtful comments. His remarks were well taken, and I appreciate his concerns. Anytime the governor issues a veto, that's something that we're going to take another look at. Obviously, he has some concerns with it, and so we appreciate that. We respect the governor, and we're going to listen to those concerns. But ultimately, I get the feeling that the House made the decision to vote for this bill. I think on its face, it's a bill that the majority of the House believes protects children and is based on medical science. And so with those two things in mind, I think the majority of the House is likely to override the veto. But again, we respect the governor, and I think the governor made some thoughtful remarks, and we're going to give it a second look, certainly.
It sounds like, is your mind made up on that veto override?
Well, I'm always going to listen to the debate, and I want to hear both sides. I'm not on the Public Health Committee, so I didn't get the benefit of hearing the debate in the committee. I think I'm like most of the members on its face. I think that it's good policy, but these things are always more complicated than they're often portrayed. And so, I want to listen to both sides, and then I'll ultimately make my decision.
You're in the House. You are on the House Judiciary panel, which has seen its fair share of controversial bills this session. You got a few more to go. I think when you guys go back in session this afternoon, you might even get to deal with some more on this. A lot of the bills that come through that committee do deal with constitutional issues. And we have seen in this legislative session some passage of bills that are dubious in terms of their constitutionality. You're a very respected lawyer. I know you care deeply about what's in that Constitution. Is there some concern from your point of view that this legislature may pass too many bills that are unconstitutional or that don't stand up to constitutional muster? How do Republicans push back on that?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That's one of the things that we often hear, some occasionally from constituents, sometimes from constituents. We hear it in the media that the legislature is passing too many unconstitutional bills. And my response to that is ultimately whether a bill is constitutional or not is a decision for the courts. The legislature is charged with the role of making policy, and we pass the policy that we believe that the people want, and ultimately the courts will decide on the constitutionality of that policy. That's their arena, and we'll leave that to them. Of course, just because something has been declared unconstitutional in the past doesn't mean that that can't change. The courts change, opinions change. So we're in the business of policy making. The court is in the business of interpreting the Constitution and whether or not the bills that we pass are constitutional. So what I would say is we're going to pass the policy, and we'll leave that to the courts.
And then all of your Republican and colleagues can complain about those activist judges up there for all of that. So, all right. He's Representative Jimmy Gazaway, Republican of Paragould. We appreciate you taking time to visit with us. Thanks for talking us through on some of those bills.
Sure thing. Thank you.
All right. That's all for today's program. I'm Roby Brock. We'll see you next time.